Alan Mosman again, another session of elder training. This is number 3, and this is about how a session meeting can, should, maybe is best to be conducted. So I have talked with you some about the Book of Order, about the ministry of the church being under the guidance and oversight of the session. But sessions get together and meet together. Here are a couple of ways that sessions meet. One is to have regularly scheduled meetings, and that is the pattern of most churches. And regularly scheduled usually means monthly at a particular place and time. There are some requirements for session meetings. First of all, the moderator must be present. If the moderator is not present, you cannot have the meeting. A quorum has to be present. If you don't have a quorum, you cannot have the meeting. And your local bylaws of the session will define how many people it takes to make up a quorum. The stated clerk is the secretary for the meeting, responsible for keeping the minutes and so forth. The meetings, like all meetings in the church, are to begin and end with prayer. So those are a few basics. Meetings are called, meetings can also be called. So if between your regularly scheduled meetings, say you have meetings monthly, but halfway through the month, you decide that there is a pressing piece of business that needs to take place, the easiest thing to do is simply appeal to the moderator to call a meeting of the session. Moderators, as I am at Parkway Presbyterian Church, have the ability to call a meeting. The only requirement is giving reasonable notice. Now, it never defines out in the Book of Order what constitutes reasonable notice, but if somebody thinks that the notice you have given them is unreasonable, they will let you know that you didn't give them enough time. And any called meeting has to state the purpose of the meeting in the call, and that's the only business that can be transacted in that meeting. So let me give you an example that is current for Parkway Presbyterian Church today. This evening, we are having a called session meeting. The reason for the called session meeting is to determine if it is time to, or to set a date for returning to in-person worship. That's all that can be discussed. One of the members of the staff said, well, can we also discuss? No, sorry. The call of the meeting was to meet for that one purpose and that one purpose only. So a moderator can call a meeting, and again, it's the easiest way is to appeal to the moderator. The second way is that if two members of the session in writing to the moderator ask for a meeting to be called, the moderator has to call the meeting. Again, if you want to go that route, you need to state what's the purpose of the meeting, and it needs to be very clearly stated so that the moderator, in sending information out to the members of the session, can explain the purpose of the meeting. The quorum for a meeting can be different for a meeting in which the only thing you're doing is receiving new members. And that requires 2 elders and the moderator. So that if you have new members that are wanting to join the church, you can pretty easily call and hold that meeting without having to get everybody involved and engaged. So the Book of Order lays out for you the responsibilities of this session, the things that you are to oversee and to know about. The method of running the meeting is good old Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order tells you about things like motions and which motions have precedence over other motions and so on and so forth. And when I was in college, I had the opportunity to see firsthand the reason for using Robert's Rules of Order. It really is a very effective tool for helping a group of people understand what it is they're considering and make a decision that everybody understands the decision. Whether they agree with it or disagree with it, at least they are clear in their understanding of what the direction and the action is about. So when I was in college, I was a member of one of those social fraternities, and we had weekly chapter meetings to decide what social functions we were going to have, or if we were happy with the person who was working as our cook, and we needed to change cooks, and who was ahead or behind in keeping their dues up, and so on and so forth. And I certainly don't remember at this point in time what the issue was, but there was something about which we fretted and fussed and argued and talked for hours. And then the next week we would come back for the next meeting, and the executive committee would say, you know, we went back over that and we didn't make that decision in a proper way. So then we'd start just the whole thing all over again. And there were a couple of guys that joined the fraternity at the same time I did, who had been in the 4-H program, and they had studied parliamentary procedure. And they said, if you will let us teach you parliamentary procedure, we think that we'll not only make better decisions, but we'll make them in less time. And they were absolutely right. They taught us about making motions and about seconding motions, discussing motions, amending motions, calling for the question, a variety of motion types, and which one take priority, and which ones needed a simple majority, and which ones needed 2/3 or 3/4 even to pass. And our work became much more focused and much more effective. And you wonder, why in the world would anybody take the time to buy a copy of Robert's Rules of Order? This guy, because I have seen how effective Robert's rules are in helping groups of people make decisions. So when you make decisions in a session, somebody will make a motion. The motion needs to be seconded. That means somebody else agrees, not necessarily agrees with the content of the motion, but agrees that this is something you need to discuss and talk about. And then you have a time to discuss the motion. Someone may want to amend the motion. You know, and rather instead of that motion that says we should do it on Thursdays, I think we should do it on Tuesdays. And perhaps the person who made the motion will accept that as a friendly amendment, and if the seconder also accepts it as a friendly amendment, it becomes part of the motion. Otherwise, it becomes a motion that goes through the whole process just as the original motion did, and can be amended itself. And the idea of the amendment process is to perfect the motion. And in perfecting the motion, what you really are doing is making sure that everybody understands the purpose and intent of what you're doing, that nobody is confused by odd language or something that is not clear. So perfecting the motion has to do with getting the language as precise as you can. And then a vote is taken. It's voted to approve it, and it's voted down. And then you move on. Ideally, when a committee makes a report and there is going to be a motion, the motion should come first, and then the second, and then the person who made the motion should speak to it. What usually happens, and what I let people get away with because, well, they just like it better, and we don't need to be all that rigorous sometimes, is they will discuss the motion. Hey, we were talking about this, and we think this would be a really good idea, and the committee has thought about hiring John to be our lawn guy, but also to have him trim the bushes around and do this and this. And so I move that we use John, and somebody seconds, and then you go on to vote. What actually ought to happen is I move that we hire John to provide our lawn service. It gets seconded, and then you say why. John's got the best price, he's got new equipment, he does it at my condo unit, everybody loves what he's doing, the guy's honest as the day is long, he does way more work than we pay for, this is a great guy. And then the vote usually goes the other way around. That's probably not as big a deal, but ideally you should state the motion first. And the other thing about Robert's Rules of Order is that everyone gets a chance. Everyone gets a chance to state an opinion. And you will, every session that I have ever moderated, there are people who will have an opinion about just about everything that gets brought out on the table. And there are some people that you will hardly ever hear from. But at least these rules give everyone a chance to speak and to let their voice be heard. And the important part is not only to make sure that the language of the motion is refined and that everybody understands what you're voting for, but it's at the next meeting where the clerk presents the minutes to go through and make sure that those motions indeed reflect what you believe you voted on the prior month. That is the clerk's responsibility, and you all know that your memory and mine are not what they used to be. And so 6 months later, when somebody says, hey, did we make a decision about that? I don't remember what the decision was. Somebody can say, yeah, let's go back and check the minutes. And that's why you want the minutes to be really accurate. Checking the minutes isn't just seeing that they look good on paper, that there are no erasures and the margins are neat. It is to make sure that those motions have been recorded as you remember them. Because again, it is those motions that then become the direction for the life and mission of the church. In most session meetings, there will be committee reports. There usually is also a time for general discussion, anything else, and usually that's at the end, other business that can be for the good of the session and the good of the church. So that's a brief insight. You've probably been in enough committee meetings to know most of that, but just remember that the purpose of Robert's Rules of Order is to make sure that everyone is clear about what you're doing. Okay, that's enough for that one.